One of the most controversial incidents in Jesus' life is when he was baptized, and in particular, the role played by John the Baptist. I believe that John is absolutely crucial to the story of Jesus and how he begins his messianic mission to change the world. And there is strong evidence to suggest that John and Jesus not only worked together, they were also related.
People often don't think about this, but Jesus and John the Baptist are very close. They're part of the same family. It has to do with Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist. In the Gospels, we've got a word in Greek, sungenes, which means kin person. It could be cousin, it could be aunt, but it's clearly part of the same extended family.
But as with the rest of Jesus' blood family, the Bible writers have done their best to downgrade John's real status. Today, the site of Jesus' baptism is a closed-off military zone on the River Jordan, and you need special permission to visit it. The idea of Jesus having a real blood family was too dangerous for the early church fathers, as it challenged his divine status. So they simply removed them from the story.
I think what happens with the family in general is once you exalt Jesus and Mary to such a heavenly position so that they're barely human, if human at all, then there's this tendency not only to lose sight of the others, but to even deny their importance.
Oh, wow. But I believe that as well as Joseph and Mary, Jesus had 4 brothers, 2 sisters, aunts, uncles, nephews, nieces, and at least 1 cousin.
John's mentioned, but only to point to the main guy. You picture John as pointing to Jesus, when in fact he was the inaugurator. He was the one who instituted the movement that Jesus joined.
Amazingly, in the Bible, there is a crucial passage in the Gospel of Luke in which Jesus talks to a crowd of people and acknowledges John's key role.
What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet.
Now, there's no one except Moses that's ever called more than a prophet in the Bible. Being a prophet is very great. So in effect, Jesus is saying, yeah, he's a prophet, but he's more than a prophet. He said he's the messenger that was promised that is coming to prepare the way of the Lord.
Later, in the very same passage, Jesus emphasizes John's importance even further.
I tell you, among those born of women, none is greater than John.
But this idea that John could be greater than Jesus was just too dangerous for the editors of the Bible. So an extra phrase was later added to put John down, a phrase that didn't exist in the earliest source of this saying.
I tell you, among those born of women, none is greater than John. Yet the one who is least in the kingdom of God is greater than he.
A pious editor quickly adds, as a kind of a gloss, but the least in the kingdom is greater than John. And I really doubt if Jesus said that. Jesus being baptized by John is actually putting himself in a kind of disciple relationship with John. And I know that's shocking to people because they immediately think, oh, no, it's the other way around. But when Jesus is asked about John, he says that. He says that very thing.
The true nature of this relationship between John and Jesus has been an acute embarrassment to the church for the last 2,000 years. For most Christians today, the idea that John the Baptist was Jesus' rabbi, his teacher, is still inconceivable. But right at the heart of Christianity is something that disproves this: the origins of our most famous prayer.
Okay. Now there's one thing they share that is very, very interesting, and this is the prayer Jesus taught his disciples, the Our Father. Let your kingdom come, let your will be done on earth. Give us this day our daily bread. This is the signature prayer that Jesus taught his disciples.
أوبح في بسمو يتكتش اسمخ استير ملكوثخ يتكنش بعيلة.
The Gospel of Luke introduces the Lord's Prayer with Jesus' disciples asking him to teach them to pray as John had done.
خفر ليح تيوتح أقبل أنا عن خفرين تي أحد ليح ولا تعليلين نحب تغربتا.
Now it's usually understood to mean John taught his disciples to pray, so teach us to pray, maybe like a different prayer. But if you look at the Greek, it can very well imply, teach us that prayer that John taught his disciples. And I think if you look at the elements of the prayer, you can make a very good case that Jesus and John both share this prayer as kind of, I would call it the core of their message.
هوش والعلم العلماء آمين.
So maybe John first came up with that prayer.
Just a few miles from John's traditional home, there is new physical evidence of the importance of his role in Jesus' life story. In 1999, while conducting a routine archaeological survey, Dr. Shimon Gibson found the opening to an ancient cave.
So, this is the cave of John the Baptist.
Wow, please come in.
The cave contains archaeological evidence that it was used for ritual baptism during the time of Jesus and John.
Do you feel that there's been an attempt to downplay the role of John and John's work as a baptizer in the New Testament?
Clearly, those who are dealing with the writing of the Gospels are interested in the Jesus story. That's their goal. And they're only interested in John the Baptist insofar as it helps along the story. And of course, there are certain sort of elements there that they want to downplay in order to show that Jesus is the prominent figure and that John the Baptist is the precursor, the one who is waiting there in the wings, preparing everything for the time that Jesus will arrive. But there is an interesting relationship between John and Jesus, and really the career of Jesus only blooms, if I may put it that way, after the death of John the Baptist, that John the Baptist is clearly in command up to that point.
But the Bible editors felt otherwise, and wherever possible, they tried to write John out of the story. This process is most blatant in the biblical accounts of Jesus' baptism.
In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan.
We take the earliest gospel, Mark, and we simply have the recorded fact that Jesus went down to the Jordan and was baptized by John, and he too got the calling, and that's simply all that is said.
In the next gospel, the story is already beginning to change.
Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to John to be baptized by him. John would have prevented him, saying, I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?
Although it mentions John baptizing Jesus here in the Jordan River, John is said to protest that he is not worthy of such a task.
And then you get Luke, which is the third in line, and what does he do? He doesn't even mention that John baptized Jesus. It's very subtle.
Now, when all the people were baptized, and when Jesus also had been baptized and was praying, the heavens opened.
And you think, well, wonder who baptized him. And then you get to the fourth stage, which is the latest, Gospel of John, and there's no baptism mentioned at all.
Where John baptized Jesus?
Yes, here.
This side.
The standard way of looking at it is Jesus is the main character, and he goes out to meet John, and John simply introduces him, almost like on the side of a stage. He says, here's Jesus, and then he walks off. But if you understand it in its context, it's actually flipped around. It's the opposite. John is the prophet. In fact, Jesus said, you think he's a prophet? He's more than a prophet.
Ever since Jesus was declared God, the Church has struggled with the balance between his divine and human natures. And it is the divine that has won out. The losers were John the Baptist and the rest of his blood family.